Westminster Abbey, London. November 17, 1982. 200,000 mourners line the streets for a state funeral. Among the dignitaries walks Colonel Viktor Andropov, KGB handler, believing diplomatic immunity makes him untouchable. He's wrong. 8 meters behind him, 4 MI6 operatives move in perfect synchronization with the funeral procession, their forged credentials buried in government databases for 3 months. As the Abbey's 400-year-old organ reaches its crescendo, and 8,000 attendees rise in unison, the operatives draw suppressed weapons. Andropov falls silently into a pew, his assassination masked by ceremony and history. This was Operation Sphinx's Veil. Colonel Viktor Andropov was born in Leningrad in 1941, 6 months before Germany invaded the Soviet Union. His father, a mid-level NKVD officer, died during the siege of Leningrad when Viktor was 3. The boy grew up in state orphanages, excelling in languages and mathematics. By age 19, Andropov had fluency in English, German, and French. The KGB recruited him directly from Moscow State University in 1960. His defining capability was invisibility through ordinariness. Associates described him as methodical, never flashy. He dressed in off-the-rack suits purchased from London department stores. He attended theater performances alone, ate at middle-tier restaurants, maintained no mistresses. This behavioral discipline made him extraordinarily difficult to track. While other Soviet handlers drew attention through extravagance or paranoia, Andropov simply blended. By 1975, Andropov ran a network of 12 agents across Western Europe. MI6's counterintelligence directorate designated him Target Priority Alpha 3. His networks had penetrated the British Foreign Office, West German intelligence, and NATO operational planning cells. The damage assessment conducted in 1981 concluded Andropov's operations had compromised at least 40 classified documents and exposed 2 MI6 officers working in East Berlin. Intelligence services had tracked Andropov for 7 years. Conventional approaches failed repeatedly. He never deviated from established patterns long enough to create vulnerability. He maintained perfect operational security, communicating with agents through dead drops that rotated on 14-day cycles. Surveillance teams lost him 6 times between 1978 and 1981. Each disappearance lasted between 48 and 72 hours, suggesting safe houses MI6 never located. By October 1982, MI6 concluded Andropov represented an unacceptable strategic threat. His networks were expanding. Recent intercepts suggested he was recruiting within MI5 itself. The authorization to eliminate him came from the Joint Intelligence Committee in early November. The directive number was JIC 382 classified. The operational window, 3 weeks maximum. MI6 called this the hidden blade strategy. The logic was straightforward. Execute high-value eliminations during moments of maximum public attention when security forces expect spectacle, not violence. The doctrine emerged from analysis of successful Soviet operations that had exploited ceremonial events. If the KGB could eliminate dissidents during state celebrations, MI6 reasoned the reverse application held equal validity. The primary obstacle was access. Westminster Abbey state funerals involved security protocols developed over centuries. Special branch controlled every credential. Metropolitan police established concentric security perimeters. Diplomatic protection officers monitored all foreign attendees. Standard infiltration methods, forged press credentials, contractor access, emergency services disguise, would fail under this level of scrutiny. The second obstacle was execution environment. 8,000 attendees meant 8,000 witnesses. Television cameras broadcasting globally meant permanent documentation. Any visible violence would trigger immediate lockdown. The assassins would be trapped inside the Abbey with no extraction possible. The third obstacle was the target himself. Andropov attended few public events. His rare appearances came with KGB security. Soviet embassy protocol officers surrounded him at all official functions. Creating separation between Andropov and his protection detail seemed impossible. Despite these challenges, planners identified one opportunity. British state funerals included a processional element where junior government officials walked in formation behind senior dignitaries. These officials, protocol officers from various ministries, received credentials but minimal vetting. The assumption was that anyone walking in the procession had already cleared primary security screening. This assumption created a gap. The operation went from planning to execution when signals intelligence confirmed Andropov would attend the funeral. He had known the deceased diplomat personally, having worked together during a 1976 posting. The intercept came through GCHQ on November 3rd. MI6 had 14 days. Within that time frame, all elements would be in position. But first, the identities needed to become real. During the final 72 hours before execution, the lead operative, designated Agent Shepard in operational reports, experienced what handlers call legend drift. He had lived as Martin Ashworth, Home Office Protocol Coordination Deputy, for 93 days. The false identity included a flat in Pimlico, a girlfriend who believed she was dating a civil servant, and a position at a desk where he actually performed bureaucratic tasks. The deception became sustainable only by making it real. On November 15th, 2 days before execution, Shepard's girlfriend asked him about Christmas plans. In the post-operation psychological debrief, agency psychologists noted his response revealed dangerous attachment to the cover identity. He had suggested they visit her parents in Yorkshire. For approximately 40 seconds, he genuinely forgot he was an intelligence officer preparing to commit murder. The legend had consumed the operator. But the mission continued. Shepard compartmentalized, a skill drilled through 3 years of training. The Martin Ashworth identity would die on November 18th when he cleared the final security checkpoint and disappeared into a new legend. Until then, he maintained the fiction perfectly. Intercepted communications from November 12th reveal Andropov discussing his daughter's university examinations with his wife. Analysts noted nothing operationally relevant. The transcript showed him expressing concern about her stress levels, suggesting she take breaks between study sessions. He mentioned planning to call her after returning from London. When the operation concluded, that call never came. His daughter learned of his death through official Soviet channels 6 days later. By November 16th, the operation entered its execution phase. All 4 operatives had successfully embedded into the funeral planning apparatus. Their credentials appeared in the official roster maintained by the Cabinet Office Ceremonial Branch. Shepard held designation HC-247. The other 3 operatives were HC-251, HC-255, and HC-262. The codes meant nothing except they granted access to the inner processional formation. The window was 36 hours. The infrastructure began with documentation. 3 months earlier, on August 18th, an MI6 technical team accessed the Cabinet Office Central Personnel Database through an exploited maintenance window. The intrusion lasted 11 minutes. During that period, they inserted 4 complete employment records into the Home Office Protocol Coordination Division. Each record included hire dates, security clearances, supervisor names, and performance reviews. The files referenced Directive HC 9982-0847, an actual Home Office administrative order regarding funeral protocol standardization. The operatives' records predated the directive by 6 months establishing apparent bureaucratic legitimacy. One file included a supervisor notation praising the officer's attention to ceremonial detail during a June rehearsal that never occurred. The identities required supporting infrastructure. Each operative received a national insurance number, a bank account with 18 months of transaction history, and a residence with verifiable utility payments. Agent Shepard's Martin Ashworth identity included a Barclays account showing monthly salary deposits of £1,200, rent payments to a landlord who was himself an MI6 asset, and purchases at locations near the Home Office building on Marsham Street. Equipment consisted of 4 Welrod Mark the Scout suppressed pistols. The weapons, designed during World War II, remained effective for close-range elimination. Each measured 11 inches with suppressor attached. The subsonic ammunition, designated 32 ACP, produced approximately 73 decibels when fired, equivalent to a hand clap. Tests conducted at the Metropolitan Police Weapons Facility in September demonstrated the sound would be inaudible beneath organ music, exceeding 90 decibels. The pistols were modified. Standard well rods required manual cycling between shots. MI6 armorers redesigned the bolt mechanism for faster operation, reducing cycling time from 4 seconds to under 2. Each weapon held 6 rounds. The operatives would carry 1 magazine each, no reloads. Excess ammunition meant excess risk. Communication systems relied on line-of-sight signals rather than radio. Radio traffic near Westminster Abbey would be monitored by Special Branch Signals Intelligence. Instead, operatives used predetermined hand signals disguised as ordinary gestures. Touching the left lapel meant abort. Right hand to temple meant proceed. Both hands clasped meant compromise detected. The signals were drawn from diplomatic protocol etiquette, appearing natural within the ceremonial context. Escape routes presented the greatest technical challenge. The Abbey's security perimeter would lock down after the coffin entered. All exits would be monitored. Standard exfiltration through pre-planned routes was impossible. The solution was counterintuitive. The operatives would remain inside the Abbey until the ceremony concluded, then exit through normal dismissal procedures. This required the assassination to appear as medical emergency rather than violence. 2 operatives would lower Andropov into a pew. A third would position himself to block sight lines from Soviet embassy staff. The fourth would retrieve a prepared medical alert card from Andropov's jacket, a card the team would plant during a controlled corridor interaction 90 minutes before the funeral began. The card indicated Andropov had a cardiac condition requiring immediate discreet medical attention if symptoms appeared. This false documentation would explain his sudden collapse and removal. Surveillance specialists provided real-time updates on security force positioning through embedded assets in the Metropolitan Police. Execution team members knew their function, but not the full operational scope. Each operative understood only their specific task to prevent cascade compromise if one member was captured. The planning consumed 87 days. By November 15th, all equipment was distributed and concealed. The operatives had 16 hours before final positioning. At 1400 hours, Agent Shepard reported to the Cabinet Office for the mandatory funeral coordination briefing. 63 officials attended. The briefing covered processional timing, emergency protocols, and behavioral standards. Shepard sat in the 4th row, taking notes on positioning requirements. His forged identity was never questioned. The administrative fiction had achieved reality. 23 minutes into the briefing, a Cabinet Office security officer requested identification verification from all Home Office representatives. This was unplanned, not mentioned in surveillance intercepts. Shepard felt legend drift dissolve instantly. He was an assassin carrying false documents about to be exposed in front of witnesses who could identify him. He produced his home office credentials. The security officer examined the laminated card, comparing the photograph to Shepard's face. 14 seconds passed. The officer returned the credentials without comment. The administrative database entry had survived scrutiny. The legend held. Over the next 18 hours, the operatives completed final positioning. Each walked the processional route independently, memorizing distances, identifying sightline obstructions, noting camera positions. The BBC would broadcast the funeral with 12 cameras. Independent news agencies would deploy 8 additional units. Every angle required assessment. The execution point needed to be the single location where no camera had direct line of sight to Andropov, while maintaining proximity to the processional formation. That location was identified through geometric analysis. 18 meters from the Abbey's west entrance, the processional route curved slightly left around a memorial statue. For approximately 4 seconds, the formation would be obscured from 3 camera positions simultaneously. Soviet embassy staff walking behind Andropov would have their view blocked by the curve. This 4-second window represented the only viable execution opportunity. By November 17th, at 0500 hours, all 4 operatives were in final staging positions. Each had confirmed their ceremonial coats concealed weapons without visible printing. The well rods were positioned in modified interior pockets, accessible through vertical openings disguised as standard vent slits. Draw time from concealment to firing position, 1.3 seconds per weapon. At 0830 hours, Andropov departed the Abdullah Soviet embassy on Kensington Palace Gardens. MI6 surveillance observed him entering a Volvo sedan with diplomatic plates. 2 KGB security officers accompanied him. The vehicle proceeded to Westminster following the planned route. Traffic was light. Estimated arrival, 0915 hours. Shepard and the 3 other operatives arrived at the Abbey staging area at 0845 hours. They presented credentials to special branch officers manning the security checkpoint. Each operative passed through metal detectors calibrated to detect ferrous metals. The well rod pistols, constructed with aluminum frames and brass components, triggered no alerts. The 32 ACP rounds used minimal steel in their construction. The screening process relied on assumptions about what weapons looked like. These weapons looked like nothing the detectors expected. Inside the staging area, officials gathered in assigned groupings. Shepard's group consisted of 12 Home Office protocol officers, only 4 of whom were MI6 operatives. The legitimate officials discussed ceremonial procedures, unaware they stood beside assassins. One official mentioned his nervousness about walking in formation with so many cameras present. Shepard agreed it was intimidating. The conversation was ordinary, forgettable, perfect. At 0945 hours, the processional formation received assembly orders. Officials lined up in pairs. Shepard positioned himself in the 3rd rank, 8 meters behind where Andropov would stand. The other 3 operatives took positions in adjacent ranks, creating a diamond formation. From above, they would appear as random officials in ceremonial dress. From their perspective, they had intersecting fields of fire covering Andropov from 4 angles. The funeral service began at 1000 hours. The procession would not move for 90 minutes while initial ceremonies occurred inside the Abbey. During this window, Shepard executed the credential plant. He approached Andropov under the pretense of verifying diplomatic seating arrangements. The interaction lasted 37 seconds. Shepard confirmed Andropov's section assignment, provided a ceremonial program, and briefly clasped his shoulder in diplomatic courtesy. During that contact, He slipped the prepared cardiac medical alert card into Andropov's inner jacket pocket. Andropov thanked him in accented English. He seemed tired, slightly bored by the formality. He mentioned the cold weather. Shepard agreed it was unseasonable. They parted. The KGB security officers flanking Andropov noticed nothing. The medical card was positioned. If Andropov collapsed, anyone checking his pockets would find documentation explaining sudden cardiac distress. The Abbey organ began the processional sequence. 8,000 attendees rose in unison. The sound of collective movement created ambient noise reaching 85 decibels. The organ music, Bach's toccata and fugue in D minor, added another 93 decibels. Total acoustic environment, approximately 100 decibels, enough to mask any sound below 80 decibels completely. The processional formation moved forward. Officials walked in measured cadence, 2 steps per second. The distance from staging area to Abbey entrance was 340 meters. At this pace, the walk required approximately 4 minutes 30 seconds. The execution point, the curve around the memorial statue, would be reached at minute 2, approximately 11:32 hours. Shepard maintained position 8 meters behind Andropov. The Soviet colonel walked with hands clasped behind his back, head slightly bowed. He appeared contemplative. To his left and right, KGB security officers maintained spacing. Their attention focused forward, scanning for threats in the crowd. They never looked behind them. Protocol demanded they face the Abbey, showing respect to the deceased. This adherence to ceremony created the vulnerability MI6 exploited. At 11:31 hours, the formation approached the curve. Shepard touched his right temple, signaling proceed. The other 3 operatives confirmed receipt. Each placed their right hand near their coat opening, appearing to adjust their garments against the cold wind. Their fingers reached the vertical access slits. Andropov walked steadily. He was 15 steps from the curve, then 10, then 5. The formation entered the curve. 3 cameras lost line of sight simultaneously. Soviet security officers ahead of Andropov followed the curve left, their backs fully turned. The 4-second window opened. Shepard drew his weapon in one fluid motion. The well rod emerged from concealment without snagging. The suppressor extended from his hand beneath his ceremonial coat, invisible to anyone beyond 5 meters. His aim point was the base of Andropov's skull, a target representing 9 centimeters in diameter. Distance, 4.2 meters. He fired. The subsonic round crossed the distance in 0.01 seconds. The sound was a sharp exhale, barely audible over the organ music and crowd noise. The round struck precisely at the occipital bone junction. Andropov's head snapped forward slightly. His knees began to buckle. The second operative, designated in reports as Agent Falcon, fired simultaneously. His round struck Andropov's upper thoracic spine. The third operative, Agent Merlin, fired 0.4 seconds later as Andropov collapsed. His round entered just above the cardiac cavity. 3 shots. Total elapsed time, 0.8 seconds. Andropov fell forward. Shepard and Falcon moved instantly, catching his body before it struck the pavement. To observers, it appeared they were supporting a colleague who had suddenly fainted. The fourth operative, Agent Talon, stepped between the falling body and the Soviet security officers, blocking their view. He raised his hand, signaling for medical assistance with a predetermined gesture that appeared entirely natural. The formation continued moving. Officials ahead remained unaware. The organ music swelled. Shepard and Falcon carried Andropov's body to the side, lowering him onto a bench positioned against the memorial statue. They arranged him in a sitting position, head slumped forward. From distance, he appeared to be resting. Talon approached the nearest special branch officer, speaking urgently but quietly. He reported a diplomatic guest experiencing cardiac distress. The officer immediately radioed for medical support, following standard emergency protocol. An ambulance was already staged nearby for exactly such contingencies. The response time would be under 90 seconds. Meanwhile, Merlin performed the security sweep. He knelt beside Andropov, ostensibly checking vital signs. In reality, he confirmed cessation of life. No pulse, no respiration. The rounds had achieved immediate incapacitation. Death occurred within 20 seconds of first impact. Merlin retrieved the planted medical card from Andropov's jacket, showing it to the arriving special branch officer. The card confirmed cardiac history. Everything aligned with expected medical emergency. The officer accepted the narrative without question. The KGB security officers, now aware something had occurred, pushed through the formation toward Andropov. They arrived to find British officials performing medical assessment on their charge. The scene appeared exactly as a cardiac emergency would appear. No blood was visible. The entry wounds were small, the heavy coat absorbed fluid, and the body position concealed the injury locations. A Russian security officer demanded to know what happened. Talon explained calmly. The gentleman collapsed suddenly, likely cardiac event, medical team arriving momentarily. The Russian attempted to reach Andropov, but was intercepted by special branch officers enforcing medical protocol. In Britain, medical emergencies followed British procedures. The Russians could not override this without creating diplomatic incident during a state funeral. The ambulance arrived at 11:33 hours, 78 seconds after the shooting. Paramedics transferred Andropov onto a stretcher. Standard procedure dictated transport to Westminster Hospital, 3.2 kilometers away. The ambulance departed with Andropov's body, Soviet security officers demanding to accompany. Special branch allowed one officer to ride along, maintaining control of the situation. Shepard and his 3 colleagues returned to the processional formation. They continued walking toward the Abbey as though nothing had occurred. Television cameras, which had briefly panned toward the commotion, returned to covering the main ceremony. Commentators mentioned a medical emergency, but provided no details. The funeral proceeded without further disruption. Within 12 minutes, the 4 operatives had reached the Abbey entrance and merged with the 8,000 attendees. They attended the 90-minute funeral service, standing in their assigned positions, singing hymns, maintaining their legends perfectly. When the ceremony concluded at 1300 hours, they filed out through normal dismissal procedures, presenting credentials one final time as they exited. By 1345 hours, all 4 had separated and entered extraction protocols. Shepard walked to Waterloo Station, purchased a ticket to Southampton, and departed London. He would never return to the Martin Ashworth identity. The flat in Pimlico would be emptied by an MI6 cleaning team within 24 hours. The girlfriend would receive a letter explaining Martin had accepted an overseas posting and ended the relationship. She would never learn the truth. At Westminster Hospital, Soviet embassy officials faced a difficult situation. British doctors examining Andropov's body quickly identified gunshot trauma. But confirming assassination meant admitting their security failed to protect him during a ceremonial event. It meant acknowledging British intelligence executed an operation in the heart of London. It meant escalation. The Soviet embassy chose containment. Official reports listed cause of death as cardiac arrest. The body was immediately claimed through diplomatic channels and transported to the embassy. No autopsy was permitted on British soil. Within 36 hours, Andropov's remains were aboard an Aeroflot flight to Moscow. British authorities cooperated fully with this rapid repatriation. The well-rod pistols were disposed of separately. Each operative disassembled their weapon during extraction, distributing components across London in storm drains, construction sites, and the Thames. By 1700 hours, no physical evidence of the weapons remained. By November 20th, 72 hours after execution, the Soviet embassy understood what had occurred. Internal KGB communications, intercepted through signals intelligence, revealed awareness of assassination, but uncertainty about attribution. Multiple intelligence services had motive. The British seemed unlikely suspects precisely because the location was so public. This paradox created operational ambiguity that served MI6's interests. Official British government statements expressed condolences for Colonel Andropov's sudden passing. The Foreign Office noted his diplomatic service and extended sympathies to his family. No investigation was announced because officially, no crime occurred. A man died of natural causes. The narrative held. Tactically, Operation Sphinx's Veil achieved total success. A high-value KGB handler was eliminated without diplomatic crisis. MI6's penetration capabilities remained uncompromised. Soviet intelligence lost operational momentum in Western Europe as Andropov's networks collapsed without his coordination. Intelligence assessments concluded the operation disrupted KGB activities for approximately 18 months. Strategically, costs emerged. Over time, the operation revealed MI6's willingness to conduct assassinations on British soil during state ceremonial events. This precedent concerned some within the intelligence community. If sacred ceremonial space could be weaponized, nowhere remained neutral. The psychological impact on British intelligence officers who learned of the operation created trust fractures. Some questioned whether eliminating one handler justified corrupting a state funeral. For the 4 operatives, consequences varied. Shepard retired from active service in 1985, unable to maintain deep cover after the Legend Drift episode. Falcon and Merlin continued operational careers, but refused assignments involving identity immersion. Talon transferred to analytical work. The psychological burden of the operation, executing a target in front of thousands, including families and children, proved corrosive despite professional success. MI6's assessment concluded the benefits outweighed costs. One Soviet handler versus strategic advantage represented acceptable exchange. Whether this proved correct became clear over subsequent years as Soviet intelligence capability in Britain measurably declined. Was Viktor Andropov a dangerous intelligence officer orchestrating legitimate threats against British interests? Or a father who wanted his daughter to succeed at university? Both framings are accurate. He was a skilled professional serving his country while damaging another. He was a human being with family and ordinary concerns who happened to work in espionage. Perspective 1 argues Andropov's networks compromised national security, endangered British agents, and justified elimination through any practical means. The state funeral provided unique opportunity to remove a threat that conventional methods could not neutralize. Refusing to act would have meant accepting continued damage. Perspective 2 argues that executing someone during a state funeral, in front of thousands, including children, surrounded by symbols of British cultural heritage, represents moral corruption regardless of tactical justification. The setting matters. Some spaces should remain sacred even in intelligence work. Using ceremony as cover degrades the ceremony itself. The answer reveals more about your worldview than about Andropov or MI6. If you believe national security permits any action that succeeds without diplomatic consequence, Operation Sphinx's Veil was brilliant. If you believe certain spaces must remain separate from violence to preserve meaning, it was corrosive regardless of outcome. What's your take on whether sacred ceremonial space can be ethically weaponized for state intelligence operations? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you reconsider the boundaries between necessary security operations and moral corruption of public trust, hit that like button and share this with someone who appreciates the complexity of intelligence work, where every success carries hidden costs that compound over decades.